Hey everyone, welcome to Ben's Jazz Kitchen. A name so misleading it might just stick. See, the jazz, or the improvising, actually is done in the kitchen well before I make these videos. Anyway, I am Ben, and I'm usually found on my guitar channel reviewing guitars, and I didn't really think that these cooking videos would fit in over there, so I created a new channel just to explore those ventures. So today I'm making one of my most requested pizzas two different ways, a gourmet way and a budget way. That pizza is called the Vampire Killer. We actually need to come up with a much better name than that. I mean, I think Vampire Killer is probably the de facto garlicky pizza at every pizzeria.
Slayer?
Like Vampire Slayer? No, we can't do that. Our friends have that hot sauce called Vampire Slayer.
Murderer.
No, murderer? That sounds way too personal. Like, I've got a vendetta. Vampire murderer? No. Vampire assassinator, vampire liquidator, vampire dispatcher, vampire... So I'm going to be making my Vampire Killer pizza two different ways. One of them is the gourmet way, and that's the way that I always make the pizza, and that's with fresh spices and herbs and higher quality ingredients all around. And the second way I'm going to make it is the budget way, where you're using more price-friendly ingredients and things you're more likely to find around your house, like dried spices, for example. I'm going to do my best to replicate the exact quantities of each ingredient inside each recipe. So at the end of this video, it's going to be a taste versus taste, price versus price, cook method and prep versus cook method and prep, and then we'll talk about that. Now, before I get into all that though, I'm going to list all the ingredients so you have an idea of what they are, and then do a little bit of cut work in the edit so you can see some of the prep work that went into this. Now, before we even get to that, I want to preface by saying that I've been making pizzas successfully for a few years now. My bar of success is a little bit low. Really, the only 5 criteria are that it's not undercooked, it's not overcooked. I like it, my wife likes it, it's worth doing again. Pretty simple, right? So regarding the ingredients, let's first talk about what's different in each pizza, and then I'll go over what's the exact same in each pizza. For the gourmet pizza, I'm using a sourdough recipe that I've honed over the past 4 or 5 years. This recipe contains, of course, the sourdough starter, doppio flour, bread flour, whole wheat pastry flour, extra virgin olive oil, salt, and water. For the sauce, I'm going to be using a can of San Marzano tomatoes. For the base layer of cheese, I'll be using a tri-blend of mozzarella, buttacasa, and Monterey Jack cheese, totaling about 6 ounces. Before throwing it in the oven, I'll add freshly grated Parmesan and freshly chopped rosemary. For the budget pizza, we're going to start with a pre-made dough from Trader Joe's. For the sauce, it's the cheapest plain tomato sauce I could get my hands on. For the cheese, just 6 ounces of plain mozzarella. Before throwing it in the oven, I'll add dried Parmesan and dried rosemary. Now for the ingredients that are identical on both the gourmet pizza and the budget pizza. I would consider these ingredients to be the true spirit of the Vampire Killer pizza. We'll have some hot Italian Beyond sausages, burnt onions, and a couple of bulbs of roasted garlic for both the sauces and as a topping on the pizzas. If you haven't had burnt onions before, I'll put a link for that video below in case you want to check it out. It's a super easy recipe, but I think they just add so much complexity to whatever dish they're in. Oh yeah, one more difference between these pizzas. The gourmet pizza, I'm going to cook it outside in a dedicated pizza oven at somewhere around 900 degrees. It should take about 2.5 to 3 minutes to cook. For the budget pizza, I'm cooking it in this. That's your ordinary old household oven. It gets to about 500 degrees max, takes about 40 minutes to get there, and once it is there, you can look at about 9 to 10 minutes to cook your pizza. Now, after listing all these ingredients, you might be thinking, well, of course the gourmet pizza is going to taste better than the budget pizza. And I'm going to tell you outright, yeah, it is. I already know it is. I haven't had the budget pizza. I've made the gourmet pizza a bunch of times, but I just know looking at the ingredients and the fact that one is sourdough, the other one is a pre-made dough, there's not really any chance in my mind that the budget one will taste better, but that's not really what this video is about. As I mentioned before, I just want to take these two pizzas, compare them at the end, and see really maybe where I could pull back on one pizza, or maybe you can add to another pizza to elevate it, and what corners can I cut to get a same or similar quality pizza that still is pretty good. And then also factoring in the price of all the ingredients and the time it takes to prep each pizza. And these are kind of all factors that we'll talk about at the end of this video. For the gourmet pizza, we're going to be doing a sourdough crust. Now that is a pretty time-consuming task in and of itself. Yesterday at around 8 a.m. I refreshed my yeast. At about 8 p.m. I built my leaven. Then at about 4 a.m. this morning, I started to really build out the dough. That was adding the leaven, the doppio flour, the bread flour, the whole wheat pastry flour, the extra virgin olive oil, the salt, and the water. Then I let it bulk ferment for about 4 hours before dividing it into 2 dough balls, each weighing 450 grams. Now they're going to sit in their final fermentation until we cook. Now, if you'd like to see a more detailed video about my sourdough pizza base, let me know and I'll be happy to get something together for you. For the budget dough from Trader Joe's, it's pretty simple. Pull it out of your fridge, let it come to room temperature over about 30 minutes, and then cook with it. Now, I do want to say that the Trader Joe's dough also comes in at 450 grams, so we have an equal amount of sourdough versus Trader Joe dough. For the sauces, I want them to have similar consistencies. If you look at the budget sauce, it has almost a pureed consistency, whereas if we look at the San Marzano's, well, yeah, you see that? That's a whole tomato. I don't want one of those on this pizza, so I'm going to blend up the entire can of San Marzano tomatoes, and then I'm going to draw off 15 ounces, so it's the same exact volume as the budget sauce. Now that my sauce volumes are identical, I'm going to blend each one of them with 21 grams of roasted garlic. The next step is something I find really important when you're making your own pizza sauce, and that is simmering off excess water. So I'm going to take each of these sauces and put them in a wide mouth pan. Now before I get simmering, I'm going to add my rosemary. For the gourmet sauce, we're going to use about a half teaspoon of freshly chopped rosemary. For the budget sauce, I'm going to be using dried rosemary. Now, a good rule of thumb is to use 1/3 of the amount of dried ingredients to fresh ingredients. I find that a heaping 1/8 of a teaspoon of dried rosemary will get you pretty close to that. Stir those herbs in there and then start simmering down. What you're looking for is you want to be able to part these Red Seas with a spatula. It took me about 12 or 13 minutes to get to that level with both of my sauces. Now, through a bit of trial and error and re-simmering and remeasuring, I was able to get both of these sauces down to the same weight from where they started to where they ended up with. Since both of these sauces are lacking salt, we need to add some of that in there. Now, the reason I waited till after it simmered down to add it was because I wanted to know what the consistency was that was going on the actual pizza. These sauces weigh in at 335 grams, and a good rule of thumb is to put 1 gram of salt per 100 grams of tomato sauce. I'm going to round down and just do 3 grams instead of 3.35 grams of salt, because there's plenty of salt on the Beyond sausages as well as in all the cheese. For the cheeses, this is pretty easy. I'm going to take whole blocks of cheeses and grate them myself. I'm sure you've heard this before, and I would recommend this also, and that is to not use pre-shredded cheese. There's 2 benefits here. The first is it's generally cheaper to buy a block of cheese versus the pre-shredded stuff, and second of all, they usually add a starch or something to a pre-shredded cheese that affects the way that it cooks and the meltiness of it once it's on a pizza. So if you want a little boost in quality and a better deal, spend the 5 minutes and grate your own cheese. For my gourmet pizza, my tri-blend of cheese is going to consist of 3 ounces of whole milk, low moisture mozzarella, 2 ounces of Butterkaiser cheese. Now that literally translates to butter cheese because of its buttery-like quality and flavor, despite the fact that there's no butter in there, and 1 ounce of Monterey Jack cheese, which is a mild cheese but adds a nice stretchiness to a pizza. For my budget pizza, I'm just going to be using 6 ounces of the very same mozzarella that I used on my gourmet pizza. Now this is a cheese I've been buying from Trader Joe's for a few years on my pizzas, and I think it's just a great price, a really good mozzarella, and I like the salt content of it for the pizzas that I make anyway. For the additional toppings, I'm going to cook up some Beyond sausages and then chop them into little pieces and put them on each pizza. You see me cooking up 4 here because I was up against an expiration date, but I assure you that only 1 of them is going to go on each pizza. Now we get to the burnt onions, one of my favorite toppings. I'm going to put an equal amount of these on each pizza. Now check my description below for a link to the short on how to make these. It's super easy and super quick. For the finishing toppings, on the gourmet pizza, I'm going to be putting freshly grated Parmesan and freshly chopped rosemary. On the budget pizza, I'm using dried Parmesan and dried rosemary. Now let's get these ovens fired up, cook some pizzas, taste them, talk about them, and I'll see you in a bit. So on my left is the gourmet pizza, on the right is the budget pizza. Just from the looks of them, I can tell that the gourmet pizza is a higher quality pizza. Yeah, it does have the same ingredients like the sausage and the onions on top, but the cheese has more stretchiness to it. The dough itself is a little bit more bouncier, whereas the dough on the budget pizza here seems to be a little bit more rigid. Let's check out the bottom of these pizzas. So the gourmet pizza, see that the bottom has a really nice caramelization to it and some marbling as well going on there. It's not completely even, but I also think that's part of the joy of cooking in a pizza oven. Whereas the bottom of the budget pizza, we can see here that it's more of an even cook, which maybe some would consider to be an advantage. It also looks a little more boring to me, for what that's worth. Now let's go in for the taste. I have to admit, I'm a big fan of not having to eat food in front of people on my guitar channel, but I really have nobody to blame for that except for myself in this instance. Let's start with the gourmet pizza first. You immediately get that robustness and garlicness of the toppings first and foremost. And then it kind of gives way to some of that buttery character and nuttiness that's in probably the Parmesan and the Butterkaiser cheese. There is a little bit of sweetness in these garlics that are on top that are extra cooked. I do like that though. It's still garlic, but it does have that sweetness to it. The sauce surprisingly fades underneath everything. I'm really not getting a strong note of the roasted garlic in it, but again, that's kind of hard to measure when you also have garlic on top. The finishing rosemary that I throw in there, I'm not really picking that much up at all. Now let's try the crust. That dough is soft and tangy, and it's got a little bit of chew to it, but it's not too much. Also, there is a ton of sourness to this, which I'm really enjoying. I actually took this dough right there to the edge where it hits maximum sourness before the gluten start to break down and it becomes impossible to work with for a pizza. So this pizza, I'm gonna give it an A+. It is just right there at the top for me. Now let's try the budget pizza and see how that goes. Immediately, a little bit tougher of a crust to get through. That's interesting. There's an immediate sweetness in the budget pizza that I didn't pick up at all on the gourmet pizza, and I'm thinking it might have something to do with the tomatoes. Now, I know that generally San Marzano tomatoes are considered to be one of the sweeter kinds of tomatoes for a pizza, but I have no idea what is in that can of budget sauce that I bought. I mean, it could be Roma tomatoes, or it could be some other tomato on the vine, or who knows what it is, but it's definitely sweeter than what I'm getting from the gourmet pizza. And to be honest with you, it actually is a nice dimension that it's adding to the pizza because it is such a savory pizza with the sausage, the garlic, the burnt onions. It's nice to have that sweet note on there too, which I didn't know I was missing it until trying this pizza. So that's something to consider going forward with my Vampire Killer pizza. I should also point out that there was no sugar in the budget canned tomatoes. Both of these pizzas just have tomatoes in a can, no salt, no sugar, and that's it. The cheese isn't as pronounced on the budget pizza either, and that might be a good thing to some people because it's sort of just taking a back seat to all the toppings and the sauce and really letting those shine, whereas it is one of the prime elements of the gourmet pizza with that tri-cheese blend. Let's try the crust now and see how that compares. The crust is okay. First off, what I want to say is it's very dense, especially when I compare it to the crust on a sourdough, which has more air pockets and just a general fluffiness to it. Flavor-wise, it's like a glorified frozen pizza, and I know that sounds harsh, but what I mean is it's a very neutral, muted flavor. Doesn't offend, doesn't really wow. It's just a vehicle to carry these toppings. Overall, I'd still give the pizza an A-. There are things about it that I did really enjoy, even more so than the gourmet pizza. All right, let's talk about the prices of these pizzas. Now, there's a couple ways to break down the prices. The easiest is the total cost of ingredients. For example, I need bread flour for this recipe. I'm going to go to the store and buy some bread flour. Looking at it that way, the total cost of ingredients for the gourmet pizza is $78.96. The total cost of the ingredients for the budget pizza is $50.29. So about a 57% price increase for the gourmet pizza over the budget pizza. Of course, neither of these numbers give you the accurate per ingredient price of just that pizza. So breaking it down further, for example, we'll take a bag of King Arthur bread flour. That's $9.99, and it contains 2,270 grams of bread flour, of which I only need to use about 120 grams for this recipe, or just about 50 cents worth of flour. Breaking down everything that way, the pizzas get a lot lower in price. So for the total price of the gourmet pizza, we're looking at about $11.78. The total price of the budget pizza, I'm looking at about $7.71. Interestingly enough, that still puts the gourmet pizza about 53% more than the price of the budget pizza. And of course, there's even more to it than that. For example, I paid $1.50 for this pre-made dough from Trader Joe's, which got me exactly one pizza dough. For the total cost of the ingredients that I paid for the gourmet pizza, it's about $18.50, and that includes the bread flour, the doppio flour, the pastry flour, some olive oil, and the salt. But now I can make 21 different pizzas at an average cost of somewhere around 89-90 cents per pie. So you win some, you lose some in that regard. So while the total cost might still be more, I'm getting more mileage out of a lot of those ingredients than just buying one-time use ingredients. The last thing I want to talk about is time, and there's no question about it. The budget pizza is certainly a quicker pizza to make. I could actually prep all my ingredients, walk to Trader Joe's, buy the pizza dough. By By the time I get home, it's almost thawed out and I could just throw that pizza in the oven and cook it. Whereas we're talking about 2 days or at least a day and a half minimum to get the sourdough pizza ready to cook, not to mention the added time of maintaining and feeding a starter for however long you've been doing it. In my case, that's about 5 or 6 years now. But doughs aside, there are a couple gains that you do have with the gourmet pizza. For example, the outdoor pizza oven heats up in about 10 minutes and it'll cook your pizza in about 2 or 3 minutes, whereas the kitchen oven takes about 40 minutes to get up to maximum temperature, which is only 500 or about half of the outdoor oven. So once your pizza's in there, you're also going to be looking at about a 9 or 10 minute cook time for this pizza anyway. So you gain some things back with the gourmet pizza. It's an interesting study anyway, or at least it is to me. All right, it's time to wrap this thing up. So let's talk about what I like, what I didn't like, and where I might go in the future with this. Dough to dough, sourdough is a winner. I'm going to go with that every single time, I think. Maybe there's better doughs out there for the budget pizza, or maybe if I yeasted my own all-purpose flour or something with like an instant yeast, maybe that'd yield a better result. Actually, I'm pretty sure it would, but I just didn't do it this time because the cost was about the same as the Trader Joe's cost. For the sauces, I'm not so sure I'd do San Marzanos again on this pizza. I think I've just been so conditioned to always use San Marzanos that I instinctively just go that way. But the truth is, on this pizza, it kind of gets lost underneath everything. If I was making a Neapolitan pizza margherita and it was one of the 4 main ingredients, that might be a different story. Whereas on the budget pizza, whatever's in that can of tomato sauce just stuck out a little bit more. And I think going forward, I might do that on the gourmet pizza because I liked the added dimension to the other flavors. Now, again, I don't know what's in that can of tomatoes. It doesn't tell you what tomatoes are using, so that flavor profile might be changing constantly. But I can tell you I've been using Cento San Marzano tomatoes for a few years now, and the flavor profile is pretty consistent. For the cheeses, I think that's a matter of preference, really. Price aside, you can have something like the gourmet pizza that has your tri-blend and the freshly grated Parmesan, and it kind of adds a neat dimension to the pizza, even like a added sort of nuttiness in this case, and that buttery smoothness of the Buttakaisa. Or you can just have regular old mozzarella cheese that is happy to just be cheese, glue everything together, occasionally provide some stretchiness or chewiness, and more or less sits in the background. And that is also really good sometimes on a pizza. For the gourmet pizza, I think I've nailed that cheese profile for this. I've been working on it for years. I've been adjusting the levels every time I cook it until I found something that worked, and that doesn't always translate to other pizzas. And so as a result, you might be wasting money on some high quality cheeses if you go overboard on them, or maybe you put the wrong mix in and it just doesn't work for the pizza. So that's something to consider also, because a mozzarella cheese kind of always works with a pizza. It's just happy to be there and happy to be eaten, right? Case in point, when these pizzas were done, I had one more dough ball and I just made a plain cheese pizza, but the only cheese I had left was a Buttakaisa cheese. And I'll just tell you right now, it's not the best only cheese on a pizza. It's a little bit too sweet and maybe even too buttery. You kind of need some of the other cheeses to dilute that strong flavor. I mean, I'm still gonna eat it, pizza's pizza, but just to prove my point. Anyway, that's my video. I hope you got something out of it. Hope it was entertaining at the very least. I got to eat pizza, so I'm happy. I'll put a link below for the burnt onions video. They're super easy to make, and they add a nice complexity to certain dishes. I wouldn't put them on cereal or ice cream or anything, but like eggs or pasta or pizza, they are A+ on those. I appreciate you guys taking your time to watch my video. If you like this stuff, consider clicking the like button or even subscribing, which is super helpful for a new channel like this. If you guys want to get my sourdough pizza dough recipe, let me know and I will make a video for that. All right, I will talk to you next time. Bye. Regardless of price, pizza is still pizza.